genuinely hate the wars. They don't want wars. I know that is so fundamentally different than the Republican Party we grew up with.
I do not agree whatsoever. These people are not principally anti-war. If Donald Trump tomorrow said, I am prepared to go to war with Mexico, they would cheer it on.
Yesterday, Trump does this crazy press conference at Mar-a-Lago. He suggested taking Greenland and the Panama Canal with military force, taking Canada with economic force, and unleashing hell on Gaza. And when you look on the Truth Socials and everywhere else, it's memes about all of the Americas in an American flag. They kind of seem to be just lining up behind whatever he says. I just am not seeing what you're seeing.
I'm so curious to see how this goes.
It's great to welcome back to the show Cenk Uygur, host of The Young Turks, author of the book Justice is Coming. Cenk, I'm so glad to have an opportunity to just have you on and to talk directly with you. You know, last time we had you on, you were on with Destiny, and we talked about some of the things we're going to talk about today, but I just want to talk to you directly. I want to first just kind of explain my understanding of the controversy that's surrounding you. If I get anything wrong, you tell me. This all kind of started with some tweets involving Don Jr. and Elon Musk. We talked about it, where you expressed willingness to work with whoever if you can accomplish the things that you believe are worth accomplishing. We talked a little bit about whether it's realistic or naive to think these people will help us do that, but that was sort of like part one. You appeared with Charlie Kirk at America Fest with Turning Point USA. We'll talk about the content of that, but you've also been criticized by some just for appearing there, like just that your presence there was the problem rather than your goals or being there. People are talking about a political 180 like Dave Rubin, which you've explained is not at all what this is. And then I've also seen in preparing for our talk today, some conversations you had with folks that I think you were previously well acquainted and friendly with that are seeming way less friendly right now for reasons we can talk about. And a lot of people that say they are on the left don't like what you're up to. Is that a fair assessment of kind of where we are right now?
Yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details, and that's why we're having this conversation. But as a summary of where people think it stands, yeah, I think that's relatively right.
Here's my view.
To be clear, I have zero issue with Cenk appearing on right-wing media. I like the idea that left-wingers shouldn't, quote-unquote, platform or appear on other right-wingers' platforms for fear of a word that used to be thrown around a lot during the first Trump presidency was normalizing them, I think is idiotic and stupid. The stupid thing to say that people should just never go on like Rogan or never go on Charlie Kirk or whatever. But if you do go on these programs, you should be prepared and willing to fight back when appropriate. And what I've seen Cenk doing, and it's, you know, what struck me as really notable yesterday when we were watching, or maybe the day before when we were watching a Piers Morgan segment, when Cenk was on there with a couple right-wingers, I can't remember. He was, for example, praising them for having disagreements about immigration. And he was saying, oh, look at you guys having this conversation. That's great. It's healthy in any kind of political movement to have a debate. And if I recall correctly, he was lamenting the fact that you just don't see that with the Democrats, which I found just to be insane, because Democrats have just been known for a very long time, or the left wing broadly in this country has been known for a very long time to be constantly fighting with each other. We constantly argue about these things. And so it seems like Cenk, from a neutral perspective, I don't know him, it seems like Cenk is trying to curry favor with MAGA audiences. It feels like a blatant attempt to enrich himself via like social clout. He seems like he's trying to like infiltrate those spaces by being nice to them. And he's either motivated by money or he has a naive notion that if he can build bridges with them, he can convince them that their version of populism is not the correct one and actually his version is. And so he seems like maybe he's trying to convince them to want programs like Medicare for All, for example. And he thinks that the populism of the right, that there's a lot of overlap with the populism of the left. And there's an opportunity for him to come in there and maybe convince them that, well, our real enemies are the oligarchs. And, you know, if we just stop fighting amongst ourselves, and to me just rings very naive. There's just zero chance that this is going to happen. Just not going to happen.
After, knowing you for, I think 16 or years or something like that at this point, reviewing the appearance, reviewing everything you've said, I don't think there's any problem with going on right-wing shows or appearing at America Fest in principle. I think we should try to talk to the other side. My goal would be try to poach their audiences, try to expose Trump's not really the populist he claims to be or whatever. I think there's no issue there whatsoever. If I were to just jump to my concern, it would be all the evidence to me points to these are obviously not good partners in the things we want to achieve. I'll give you an example. Of course, I want to cut military spending.
John Fetterman has just announced a trip to Mar-a-Lago to sit down with Trump. And he's another guy that's like, it's been, we'll say, fascinating to watch his turn over the last couple of years. He was running as a full-on lefty progressive just 2 years ago in 2022.
Pentagon, you and I have talked about it. Why wouldn't we work with whoever wants to do that? At the same time, no matter what shows up on Twitter, it's hard to imagine that Pete Hegseth, Elise Stefanik, Huckabee, and Mike Waltz are ever going to be involved in actually doing that. And so for me, it's more about how realistic is this thing? And is there a risk that your presence through no fault of your own is used simply to degrade the left with no real shot at improving anything? That's where I would place my concern, bearing in mind that I agree with a lot of what you're doing and what you're saying.
Yeah. So let me start by acknowledging that I get why people are concerned. Like when you see a pattern, and we've seen Dave Rubin do it and others, Tulsi Gabbard do it, et cetera.
Yep.
And you see what appears to be the first step there, that your mind goes to the second, the third, and the 18th step. And so like if you're on the left and you're just see us doing this peripherally, or you hear it on a different show and they showed you a 15-second clip or something, I get why you'd be concerned, right?
Yep.
Now, I've been as clear as anyone can possibly be that that is not the path we're taking. And I kind of tore Dave Rubin's head off when Piers Morgan suggested that we make up. I've got no interest in that. And what's hilarious is people tune in to the Young Turks live at 6 o'clock Eastern every day, and they go, "Wait, I don't get it. Where's the right wing turn?" They're saying things that are like super progressive, populist, left wing. What the hell are these guys talking about, right? So like I would ask you to not believe people with different incentives. What's really interesting, David, is that when I go on right-wing shows and other comments, tons of comments that
it just strikes me as a bit, I guess we'll say odd for what I think probably the most remarkable thing that Cenk has said recently in the last like month and a half during this new kind of era of Cenk is that one tweet that he posted when he said that he realized that he wasn't as angry about Trump winning as he thought he was because the establishment lost. And he was sort of celebrating the Trump victory as this necessary loss that he could capitalize on, that his movement could benefit from. That was the thing that really stuck out to me the most of all the things that he said recently. Like, dude, there's no positive spin if you're a progressive. There's no positive spin for a potential president like Trump. With his judicial picks, with the policies that he's going to implement, it's going to be a nightmare for progressive groups that are going to have to spend time later on clawing back the things that were taken from them during the second Trump presidency, just like they were taken from them during the first Trump presidency. Ogre Boy says it struck me as more of a silver lining comment. No, he said the way that he expressed it was like, no, I'm going to celebrate that the establishment lost, which necessarily means that you're going to celebrate that Trump won. And if you call yourself, if you're a self-respecting progressive, that is a really tough pill to like. I don't understand that perspective. It doesn't compute with me at all.
Wait a minute. I think right-wing media lied to me. That's right-wingers saying it because they say, I just saw like 15-second clip of you saying something outrageous or something that I totally disagree with that they view to be outrageous, right? But when I see you in a conversation, the left is not at all what I thought it was. right? Because the right wing shows have historically have framed the left as the most extreme. That everyone on the left thinks that, fill in the blank, that we should release all the prisoners and not, do anything about crime and whatever
Well, let's just pull up the tweet because I've seen the tweet as well. I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election. That opening sentence right there of this paragraph is pretty astonishing, coming from someone who espouses themselves to be progressive. Even though I was so against the guy who won, I know now MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated. I don't know how else to take this paragraph other than like he's saying that it was the best outcome that Trump won. That is what he is strongly implying here. I don't know what other inference I'm supposed to draw from him saying that. He is essentially saying that Trump winning was the best outcome because the establishment, Kamala, lost. It's just wild to me.
Thing you could imagine that's the most extreme thing on the left. Almost all the right.
And it's a kind of a confirmation of the problem that I have with super lefties. They're kind of saying the quiet part out loud. Like he's echoing the same sentiments as accelerationist lefties.
Previously believed that was the entirety of the left. Everyone who voted for Biden, Kamala Harris, etc. So when they see us doing this, they're like, oh, wow. And that's ironically now the left-wing shows are doing the same thing as the right-wing shows did. Show 15-second clip and go, well, you see a slight disagreement there. Oh, that's it. He's a Nazi, he's fascist, etc. So I understand people who were misled by that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now when you get to the real things that you're talking about, David, so how did this start and what am I seeing that others aren't seeing potentially?
Yeah.
So it started when I started running against Biden in the primary just to try to knock him out. You remember, of course, that. And at the time, you remember a lot of people said, oh, Cenk, you're crazy. Joe Biden is young and dynamic and the best Democrat to beat Trump. I mean, I had huge debates over that, including with Destiny and so many others, right? So we were 100% right about that. But what happened is I go on the right-wing shows and by the way, can I just tell you, why did I go on right-wing shows to try to knock Biden out of a Democratic primary? Because mainstream media never pays attention to the left. But if you say something on a right-wing show, mainstream media goes, oh, that's so important. Oh my God, I saw it on a right.
He was selling a book at the time. He had written a book and he was selling a book. And so he entered the Democratic presidential primaries, even though he literally cannot be president, according to our Constitution, in order to raise awareness for his book. And so when he says like, oh, I got in there to try to knock Biden out, like you either have an insanely overinflated sense of your influence in this country or you're just trying to sell books. I think it was probably the latter, right?
Right-wing show, it's so important, right?
Like the idea that Cenk could maybe garner enough support from Democratic primary voters in 2024 to knock Biden out of the race is preposterous. Like there's no universe where that's going to happen.
And I was able to bounce from there onto mainstream media, not me personally, but that idea. And it did help to knock Biden out. And that did help the Democratic Party. So if Kamala had run.
Wait, now he's taking credit for Biden. Like Biden is the reason that Biden dropped out. Biden had a historically bad debate performance, literally the worst debate performance, I think, ever captured on video for the presidential election or whatever. That was the reason why Biden was pushed out. It had nothing to do with anything that Cenk was doing.
A better campaign, or if she just finished running a better campaign, we would have been able to beat Trump, etc. But so what I started seeing though when I went on there is, wait a minute,
the idea that Biden thinks that he might have been in a stronger position to beat Trump than Kamala is absurd. But yeah,
right-wing base is not the same base that it was before. And David, by now I figured out why. Okay, because in the old days they only watched Fox News, so you couldn't talk to them. They were Fox News talking point machines, right? I heard from Sean Hannity that corporate tax cuts help the middle class. No, they don't. What are you talking about, right? But now they're getting their news not from angels, but they're getting their news from dozens of different shows. And some of them are anti-war, some of them are still pro-war, some are this, some are that. And now what I'm seeing in the right wing is they've begun to open up their mind in a way that we are not familiar with. So when I go and tell the left wing, no, they're beginning to open their mind.
DLR with another $5. If you get the pardons, Hutch, the left will finally have something to celebrate. Y'all need something to celebrate. Y'all taking so many L's. Listen, I'm all about gloating after an election. Believe me, I had so many things teed up. I was ready to go on a 6-month-long victory tour of gloating. So get your shots in while you can. He's going to be inaugurated on the 20th, and then he'll be in charge, and then he'll be vulnerable to attack. He'll have, we will criticize him, but take that. Honestly, though, I don't begrudge you for gloating as much as you are. This is, it's an American pastime to gloat about elections, right?
They think of the past and they think, oh, hell no. This guy's got to be the biggest sucker on planet Earth.
Just understand, though, that if and when we take back the House during the midterms, I'm going to f you up, bro. I am going to f you raw. I'm going to turn you around. I'm going to bend you over consensually, and I'm going to make sweet f***ing love to you. I'm going to bite your ear. I'm going to tweak your nipples. I'm going to run my fingers across your ab lines, and I'm going to make passionate, sweet sex with you. And I'm going to do it for months. And months and months. Okay, so just understand that that energy is going to be reciprocated.
Super naive. All the right wingers I've known,
all of this completely consensual. I'm going to look you in the eyes as we make love. I didn't know that men had sex missionary style until I was like 30. I had no idea. I'm like, logistically, how does that even work? But I mean, in retrospect, it's just kind of obvious. You just move some stuff up a little bit. I was dating someone and she wanted to watch gay porn as foreplay. And, that's what we did. That's what we did. And I was like, Jesus, you have sex missionary style? I had no idea. I had no idea. And I saw it and it blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is an eye-opening experience.
My whole life, never have open minds. And they're this, that, the other thing. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're seeing it wrong. Okay. And so there's a lot of populists in those hills. But because they're right-wing populists doesn't mean they agree with us on everything. It doesn't mean that they are going to turn around and be like, oh my God, you're right. We should have full trans rights. No, what that means is right-wing, like populism, the where it intersects is anti-war, anti-corruption. And by the way, even on that stuff, guys, I get it. Yes, Trump is perfectly.
The populist right are not anti-war.
Please keep going, Hutch. I'm close.
Yes. The populist right are anti-war. Also, let's crack jokes about invading Panama, Canada, and Greenland. They're not anti-war. You understand that? They're not anti-war. They have not. It's not a principled anti-war position. They're not even isolationist. They are whatever Trump says. They are whatever Trump wants in the moment. If they were anti-war, they would not be cracking jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state. And they would object that Trump refused to rule out military power and force with respect to Panama. They're itching to invade and conquer a sovereign nation. And you're over here like, oh yeah, but they're now they're anti-war. What is your evidence for this?
Corrupt, and they voted for him anyway. But by the way, so is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I know that breaks a lot of people's hearts, but they've gorged on billions of dollars. Populism, the where it intersects is anti-war, anti-corruption. And by the way, even on that stuff, guys, I get it.
Anti-corruption, the populist right intersects with the populist left on anti-corruption, which is why they elected a 34-count felon, a man who out in the open just blatantly used the office of the presidency to enrich himself via foreign government spending money on his various properties. He's selling $50 Bibles that were made in China. And you're like, oh yeah, they love anti-corruption. Are you kidding me? Did you see Donald Trump's pardon list?
Yes, Trump is perfectly corrupt, and they voted for him anyway. But by the way, so is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I know that breaks a lot of people's hearts, but they've gorged on billions of dollars in corporate cash. Establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans invented corruption, right? And they bathed in corruption. So yeah, of course, Trump is also corrupt.
There's a massive difference between accepting like PAC money to help with your campaign and what Donald Trump did. like his level of corruption. Donald Trump at every turn has tried to profit from being in the presidency in ways that we've just never seen from any other former president ever. This equivocation is just so lazy and stupid and just so unsurprising from Cenk. This idea that like, oh yeah, Donald Trump is corrupt, but Democrats invented corruption.
Corrupt, but at least that base has an instinct of being anti-corruption. And so then when I go on the shows, I say, hey guys, for example, Elon Musk, remember he's a donor, he's Trump's largest donor. And they go, well, yeah, that's true. And remember how you should be wary of the donor class. And they're like, yeah, that's true. In the old days, David, they wouldn't have said that's true. They would have been like, no way, our donors are angels and they're the greatest thing on earth. And you're the only donor that's a problem is George Soros and the unions, right? So it's a different dynamic. Like there's so many things that you ask. I know I'm taking a while, but I do want to address the other things because the idea that you're helping them or legitimizing them is absurd.
Okay, there's sort of like a three-part thing that I think will build to the most important aspect of what you just said. So first of all, I think you are doing an awesome job at correctly identifying something that's a major problem for the left and that explains a lot of the right's success, which is they aren't doing, at least right now, these toxic purity tests the way that some on the left do. You've identified the right, if you agree with them on 5% and you're kind of sick of the other options, they welcome you, even if you disagree on 95% of stuff. A lot of the opposite of that is happening on the left. I think that's spot on, and I think
that's changing. I think that was more of kind of a relic of the peak kind of resistance, first Trump era stuff. That's when like quote unquote wokeness, you know, I don't like using that word unironically, but there were some people that took, let's say, we'll say social consciousness a little too far. In terms of the purity testing or whatever. And I feel like that's been getting better for the last few years. And so now if someone ostensibly on the left goes on a program like Rogan or Theo Vaughn, I don't think it's going to provoke the same kind of outrage that we would have seen in 2019, for example, which is a good thing. Like it's just not, it's not smart strategy to insulate yourself from those kinds of audiences. And from that kind of reach, for fear of looking like you're aiding the enemy or whatever.
Awesome that you've identified that. I do want to talk a little bit about the whole, look at how they've changed.
Did I say Rogaine? No, I think I said Rogan, right?
And one of the things that during your appearance with Charlie Kirk that got some attention and that you focused in on as well is, look, they're booing Mitch McConnell and they're booing Dick Cheney. That you wouldn't have seen that in the past. I'm skeptical about reading too much into that for the following reason. I don't think they have any real idea why they're booing or they're not booing. Or what I mean is the following. Trump and Charlie Kirk right now are benefiting from saying we're different from the establishment, we're different from McConnell and Cheney or whatever. If they do a 180 on that today, at next week's AmFest, Charlie Kirk just leads the crowd in a cheer of Mitch McConnell. We got him back, guys. I don't think there's anything real about that. I think it's just something that they've decided we're going to say to create a distinction, whether there is a difference or not. So I'm worried about reading too much into they booed McConnell, because next week they'll cheer him if someone says to Trump, now we cheer McConnell. You may agree, you may disagree. Let me then do the part three of kind of where my mind is on this. I would argue that whether or not they cheer McConnell or whatever, even if we agree about the problem, the risk of the populist rhetoric as a uniting force is that the solutions are different, even if we agree on the problem. So I'll give you an example. You, I, some of the people at AmFest, we're worried about the power of the establishment and elites, the recalcitrant centers of power that are corrupt, and we're sick of them and all of that. We would identify the problem with almost the exact same language that the crowd at AmFest would. The problem is when you say, okay, left-wing populist, what's your solution? We talk about social democracy, curbing corporate power, using regulations. They will still say the solution is tax cuts for the rich and corporations and all the same stuff. So my instinct is, and tell me if I'm wrong. I want to hear, I'm open to having my mind change. My thought is, even if we really were in agreement about the problem, once we get to solutions, we're not even at all on the same page.
No, I think you are wrong. And it's very understandable because what you're describing is exactly what's happened throughout history, right?
Okay.
So that's the media and political ecosystem that we all grew up in. So again, that's why I understand people's concern. Like, whoa, wait, no way. They're all the Republicans I've known my whole life are immovable, right? And all they're ever going to do is corporate tax cuts and tax cuts for the rich. So here's where it's really important to do nuance and understand the new landscape.
Okay, tell me.
So first of all, on Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney, no, they loathe them. You guys are wrong in thinking that it's a trick. I've now talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of MAGA guys. They're not, forget the hosts. When I talk to the individuals, the actual voters, the base, they have no incentive to lie. Have you ever met a MAGA guy?
Yeah. I don't think they're lying. I just think it's been several years of MAGA saying we don't like these guys, so they're on board. But if that changes, they'll just change their minds.
No, they won't. So, let me explain why I think that they won't.
Okay.
So, look, in the beginning, it starts exactly as you're saying, David, which is Trump goes, I don't like Mitch McConnell for whatever crazy reason popped into his head at the time.
Yep.
And his wife is Coco Chow, and weirdo racist things against Elaine Chao, right?
Yep.
Not that I like Elaine Chao, I think she's terrible establishment figure, but you don't need to go racist on it.
Yeah,
So,
the problem isn't that she's Asian.
yeah, that's definitely not the problem, right? So, so I know where it started, and so you're not wrong about that. But now they genuinely hate the corruption, and they could explain. So when I say like, oh, Mitch McConnell, they don't. When I get into the longer discussions, AmFest was really tiny, right? When you get into a 3-hour conversation on Patrick Bet-David or Tim Pool show or whatever, they all go, no. I know he takes $1 billion from corporate donors and serves corporate donors. For the last 10, 20 years, as you know, definitely not 10, longer than that, 15, 20 years, David, as you know, my main thing is get money out of politics and the corruption, bring back democracy. And so whenever I talk to Democrats and I told them, well, Nancy Pelosi taking $1 billion is also corruption, they go, no way, she's an angel and you're a monster for saying that. And whenever I went to talk to the right wing, they'd say, yeah, Pelosi's terrible, but Mitch McConnell's an angel and you're a monster for saying he isn't. Now, when I go to the right wing, they go, no, you're totally right. And it's not just because he's opposed to Trump. It's because of the money that he takes from this donor class. Okay. So, and Dick Cheney, they genuinely hate the wars. They don't want wars. And that I know that is so fundamentally different than the Republican Party we grew up with that loved wars, right? So now when you go to the Hexas,
I do not agree whatsoever. These people are not principally anti-war. If Donald Trump tomorrow said, I am prepared to go to war with Mexico over the cartels, they would cheer it on. If Donald Trump tomorrow, like seriously committed to a ground invasion of Panama, they would 1000% back it broadly across the entire MAGA political movement. I don't know where he's getting this idea that the current populist right are principally anti-war. What they've done is they've cynically kind of tried to use the fact that wars have been winding down. I mean, these are the same people that were cheering. Well, maybe not. This was like 20 years ago. But a lot of these same people 20 years ago were full gung-ho. Let's get in there. Let's take Saddam Hussein out. Let's spread freedom to Iraq. And on and on and on and on. They're principally unprincipled would be a good way to put it. Yeah. I don't know where Cenk is getting this idea that they wouldn't be cheering on an invasion of Panama tomorrow if Trump said he wanted to do it.
And the Stefanic's of the world, David,
Yep.
That's where you get into a really interesting dynamic.
And they would come up with some rationale. They would, like, well, actually, the Panama Canal should have been ours to begin with. Well, actually, military intervention in Mexico is justified because of the fentanyl crisis, and on and on. They would find whatever rationale they needed to go along with Trump's expansionary goals.
Now, in the beginning, Trump is not his base. Trump's not going to come out and go, oh my God, guys, I've seen the light, right? And I'm not going to serve Elon Musk or Miriam Adelson or Tim Mellon or
like they're not anti-war. They hate Ukraine and they like Vladimir Putin. That's what's going on. When they say they want peace in Ukraine, what they're saying is they want Ukraine to just surrender. That's what they mean. It has nothing to do with like saving Ukrainian lives, as they sort of sleazily try to imply with that framing. It has nothing to do with like, well, I just want peace. No, you want Ukraine to just accept losing vast territories of its sovereign borders.
any of these guys or the oil companies. No, what's he doing? He's saying drill, baby, drill, because the oil companies gave him a ton of money. He gave domestic policy to Elon Musk and foreign policy to Miriam Adelson. So why does Stefanik and Hegseth and all those guys, they're hardcore. Mike Wall's a giant neocon.
Yes.
Why are they in the Trump administration? Because Trump's doing what every politician does, kissing the ass of his donors. And that's how he's going to start. And if his base doesn't challenge him, that's how he's going to end.
Did the base challenge him last time? Like, what evidence do we have this time they'll challenge him?
So that's what I'm getting to. So, David, you're right. In the first term, which now was a long time ago,
yep,
the base didn't challenge him at all. Okay, if Trump said something, they parroted it and it was over, right?
Yep.
Now, when I go on those shows or I put on X, hey, you know that Rubio, Stefanik, Walls, and Huckabee are neocons, and they're going to try to drive you into war. Wall of thousands of comments. You're totally right. We're worried about it. We trust Trump. Let's see how it goes. But we got an eye out for it. Like, they're totally aware that they're neocons and they don't like it. So Hegseth is a different animal because he's partly neocon and partly like meathead, and they like the aggro part of Hegseth and the military part.
Yep.
But they're not going to like the neocon part. And if I'm right about any of this,
yeah,
war is where it breaks, where the base then says to Trump, no, brother, we told you anti-war. We didn't go tell you to help Israel invade Iran. No,
I'm not even sure about this. And I think this is really, I don't know that this is an ideological disagreement. I just don't know that we're on agreement on the facts. I'll give you a counterexample to what you're talking about. Yesterday, Trump does this crazy press conference at Mar-a-Lago. During this press conference, it was like 30 minutes long, he suggested taking Greenland and the Panama Canal with military force, taking Canada with economic force, and unleashing hell on Gaza, or allowing hell to be unleashed. That doesn't sound very anti-war.
No.
And when you look on the truth socials and everywhere else, it's people defending it, memes about all of the Americas in an American flag. They kind of seem to be just lining up behind whatever he says. I just am not seeing what you're seeing.
Yes.
Yeah, David, that's exactly it. Because I dove in more, I'm seeing something that others aren't. And that's why I understand the skepticism.
But am I wrong about the reaction to yesterday's crazy
you're
tirade?
Halfway wrong. Yeah,
I'm halfway. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I know I'm out on a limb here because believing that the right wing is going to turn on Trump on specific issues where they have disagreement when they've never done it before, I get that I'm taking a risk by saying that they're going to do that, right?
I question whether there is disagreement.
There is. So that's what I'm saying. So, and we're all going to find out with our own.
Maybe with like niche online stuff, but you know, very broadly, MAGA would fully back like military strikes in northern Mexico, for example. Like if it comes out 2 months into Trump's presidency that he authorized drone strikes in Tijuana to go after the cartel, which would be an act of war, the MAGA base of voters would very broadly back that. 90% approval for that kind of thing.
Eyes and ears, if I'm right or wrong, right? And you've seen me go out ahead of people before, right? Where I said in 2013, I said Bernie could beat Hillary Clinton 3 years before he had that historic run. I said Biden was too old and couldn't possibly win, etc. So now I'm saying, yeah, I see that disagreement. So, for example, on what you mentioned, just like I said, Trump in the beginning goes to serve his donors. And so he goes, oh, yeah, Miriam, like the Palestinians aren't slaughtered enough. I'll slaughter them even more, right? As long as you keep the money coming, right? And he engages in his fantasies about buying Greenland or invading in Panama, etc. So the first reaction that folks are going to have is we're defending Trump. And especially when the left attacks him, no, he doesn't mean invading Greenland. He means buying Greenland. He doesn't mean this, he means that. So will you get tons of that, 80% of that? Yes, right? And it's not quite 50-50. But do I see the 20% that is going, no, you're right. We didn't say invade any countries. We said anti-war. So that kernel already exists and we're not even at day one.
Well, so he's conceding that the same point that I just made, which is like the vast majority of Trump supporters would back military strikes in Panama or Mexico or whatever. He's focusing on what, 10-20% of people that maybe it's less that they're anti-war and more that they're isolationists. And I think there's a difference. I think there is a distinction between those two things. There's people that are motivated. When we say anti-war, what we mean is people that want to reduce the amount of suffering that people all over the world experience as a result of armed conflicts. When we're talking about isolationists, we're talking about people that are fiercely nationalistic. They don't believe that we have any kind of moral responsibility to anybody outside of our borders. It's a completely different set of motivating factors.
And when he actually, and what the number one thing they say is, guys, cut it out. He's obviously bluffing, right? And you're hurting his chances of bluffing when you say that he's definitely not going to do it, right? So, if he goes to invade Greenland, he will definitely lose half his base. That is mental, right? And they are actually anti-war. So
I don't think that's true. I don't think he would lose half of his base. I think he was right a moment ago when he said 10-20%. Maybe then you would see some pushback, but I do not think he would lose 50% support. I don't know where I don't know what he justifies. I don't know how he justifies saying that. What is he drawing from to come to that conclusion?
So
everything that we've seen from MAGA so far is they are willing to go with him wherever he wants to go. The stuff that came out about the classified documents, for example, was crazy. Like he was showing classified documents with respect to a proposed invasion of Iran in like a military thought experiment or whatever. It wasn't an actual plan to invade Iran. It was, the military drew up a hypothetical, like if we were to invade Iran, if we had to invade Iran in the future, this is what it would look like. He was showing, which is like highly classified information. He was showing that to a biographer. He stole classified documents, and when the FBI told him to give it back, he tried to hide those documents. He tried to destroy evidence. He tried to destroy camera footage from Mar-a-Lago. He asked his subordinates to lie to the FBI and to what's the group that is it, the NARA, the National Archive or whatever it is, and they didn't give a. His supporters did not give a single flying. They're never gonna, there's a really good chunk of the country. I don't know what the percentage is, but there's an enormous chunk of the country that will never abandon Donald Trump. They will go with him wherever he wants to go. He has, in their eyes, emerged as America's last hope. He's the only one that can save this country, and nothing is gonna pierce that. Nothing's gonna get through. That kind of cult of personality just doesn't exist on the left. There is no figure in Democratic Party politics that has the same level of influence over Democratic voters. Not Bernie, not anybody, like no one. No one has that level of influence on the Democratic side of things. It's an enormous strength for the Republican Party, like to have that level of unity.
But that's not going to happen because he's not going to do that. He's bluffing, right? Look, this is where I think the rubber hits the road, and this is now I'm really out on a limb. Okay. I think his base is going to turn on Israel, and so when he goes, yeah, no, I'm going to give Israel another $30 billion, and I'm going to help them.
Chill, bro, Baggins. Thank you so much, buddy.
At some point, MAGA's going to go, now that's enough, brother, man. That's enough. We said America first, not Israel first. And so I think they're going to turn on that.
Well, you have like the alt-right side of things, which is, I don't know how big the alt-right is. I don't know what percentage of Republican voters are just outwardly anti-Semitic. I think like a lot of the lack of support for Israel that we see from right-wingers just comes from a place of like kind of Nazi adjacent shit. So like Dan Bilzerian, he's just going full anti-Semite. Candace Owens, full anti-Semite, like that kind of wing of the extremist kind of side of Republicans. A lot of them are motivated by just like anti-Jewry, fresh and fit, like that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the vast majority of Republican voters view Israel as a crucially important ally, and they're not going to turn on Donald Trump because he sends them weapons or authorizes or co-signs like extreme use of force in Gaza. They are not going to abandon him.
And that's the right wing's never turned on Israel. The left wing's never really turned on Israel. No one's allowed to turn on Israel in America. But when you tell the right wing you're not allowed to do something, okay, let's see what happens. So
the left wing has not turned on Israel. Does he mean the Democratic Party? Again, the equivocation here he makes between the two parties is really something.
So again, we'll see. I get that I'm predicting unprecedented things, but I'm doing that based on what I'm actually seeing on the ground.
Listen, my best assessment in having reviewed all of the evidence and in talking to you here is I think it's clear you're not doing a Dave Rubin. I think your heart's in the right place. I think retrospectively, here's my prediction. I'm not big on predictions. I think in a few years you'll say, I was a little naive with my expectations. And I could be wrong, you could be wrong, we don't know. I think if there's a fault here, we've seen, you're right, it's been a long time. And for 8-9 years, almost 10 years now, since Trump came down the escalator and said Mexicans are rapists, the highest value has been they ultimately do support whatever Trump wants. They don't really care about free speech or freedom or family values or money in politics. That's what we've seen for the last 9.5 years. I hear you saying it's going to change, but we are on the same page that it hasn't been that way, right? I think that part we do agree on.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could list you dozens of examples where they say they're against cancel culture, and then they'll say, well, we should cancel them, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, look, but to be fair, the Democrats did the same thing. We're against cancel culture, but if you criticize Israel on a college campus, we're going to arrest you and take away your diploma. That sounds like cancel culture to me, right? So, I mean, but I can give you dozens of.
Well, that's not what happened, but okay.
Other examples. You're protesting oil companies, pipelines. We're going to pass a law in Florida that says we could run you over in our cars, right? I mean, it doesn't get any more cancel culture than murdering someone with your cars because they protested an oil company, right? So, and freedom of speech, they take away freedom of speech all the time. So I totally agree that the last 9.5 years, they have not shown what I am seeing that they're going to do in the future. And I totally agree with you, David, that we're going to come back 2-3 years from now and see how this went and see, hey, was I right that there was this, that their composition had changed and they were more open to a rebellion against Trump and actually had a mind of their own as opposed to being in a cult for Trump. And I get if you're on the left that you're like, no way, they're in a cult, etc. But guys, remember, we all live in bubbles. The Trump people have been in a massive bubble for a long, long time, right?
Yes.
But we've also been in a bubble. And our bubble says, if you disagree with any of us 5%, we kick you out of that bubble and we call you a racist, a fascist, and every word in the dictionary. And then we go, oh my God, how did we lose the popular vote? Well, you lost the popular vote because you pushed everyone out.
Yep.
Okay. And
no denying that. I'm with you 110% on that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And MAGA, when they hear me say things that they didn't even, you know that MAGA doesn't realize we're anti-corruption, the left is anti-corruption. They don't even realize the left is anti-war because Kamala Harris was like, Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are my best friends. I'm going to go on a college campus tour with them, right? So the establishment is pro-war, and the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has become more establishment, right?
What the man? What the hell? Like, didn't the Iraq war end on Obama's watch? Didn't the Afghanistan war end on? So so both the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war started on a Republican's watch. Obama was the one that essentially ended the Iraq war. Biden was the one that ended the Afghanistan war. Like, supporting Ukraine and even sending weapons to Israel is not the same thing as being pro-war. Joe Biden was, without a doubt, the most dovish president we've had since, I really don't know. I feel like you'd have to go back before World War II. Whatever your criticisms of Biden might be, you can't call him like hawkish on foreign policy. The fact that he ripped the Band-Aid off and got us out of Afghanistan, a forever war. We were going to be stuck there forever in a quagmire. Maybe Carter, I guess. But I mean, like, Carter was Carter's track record is a little bit meh on foreign policy stuff because he supported a lot of like really shitty people. But this idea that like Biden was this pro-war president is just whatever. Okay.
So they look at it and they're super surprised that the left thinks is anti-war, anti-corruption, and all these things, right? When I talk to them about paid family leave, Patrick Bet-David polled his audience. 75% of his audience said yes, paid family leave. 12 weeks off for moms after they have a baby. That's arguably a conservative principle. I think it's a giant progressive principle. We know it's a giant progressive principle, but that's where the unity can come. But you can't pass any of these things or even have hope of passing any of these things if you tell the people who are in charge, who won the popular vote, we're going to hate all of you. We're never going to work with you. We're never even going to talk to you. So we have no hope of ever winning those votes back because you can't win them back if you're not talking to them, right? So but we don't live in a bubble. No, we also live in a bubble, and our bubble needs to be burst because unfortunately, some portion of the left has stopped being open-minded. And what I say on Young Turks all the time is our community.
Paul says, I'm sorry, Mighty Wet Sox says, progressive policies are popular. Most progressive politicians just suck ass. I fully agree with you. Fully agree with you. Not necessarily, like a lot of these policies are really popular. We've seen some really interesting numbers recently where it's like, we're seeing a surprising amount of Republicans, when polled, are answering that government should be responsible in ensuring healthcare to everyone, which is like a mind-blowing proposition because then you look at the Republican politicians and what are they doing? They're trying to like kill or gut the ACA, get rid of pre-existing conditions. They want all of that privatized. Paid family leave is enormously popular. It's like 70-80% of the country. But progressive politicians are just they're just so messy. They're just such a mess.
Is open-minded and open-hearted, right? We're trying to do the right thing and we're trying to get there no matter what. And what I would ask all of you is eyes on the prize. The prize is policy. If you pass policy, you improve actual people's lives. If you don't, all of us in media and politics are just playing ego games. Who's bigger? Who's this? Who's more pure? Who's the one that represents blah, 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 blah. That's all about ego. But actually getting policy passed affects your life. And you're not going to get policy passed going into your little bubble.
Here's where I disagree with Cenk as well, is that he seems to be saying that, I don't know if he's saying that policy is enough to get you over the finish line or if it would be instrumental in getting you over the finish line. But I think if anything, of any election in modern history, 2024 has taught us that policy is really not the thing that wins elections. I don't think that when Americans go to the voting polls, when they go to the ballot boxes or they mail their ballots in or whatever, I think the vast majority of Americans are just they're not thinking about policy. If it was about policy, then like Joe Biden, for example, did so many progressive policies, just way more progressive than any modern president. Any modern president, not just through him, but through the regulatory agencies that he staffed. They did so much pro-union, pro-worker policies, and they were not rewarded for it. Unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case, but vibes seem to trump policy. And I don't know if that has always been the case. I don't know if that problem is worse now because of social media. And now you have these narratives that pop up that are really difficult to counter. And so, things like, oh, they're sending money to Ukraine rather than like that stuff becomes more salient than here's this policy that we did that lifted this many millions of people out of poverty. I don't know if that's a relatively new thing, but it does appear to be the case that vibes are substantially more important than policy in the 21st century.